Yeah, thank you very much, Peter, for your kind words. Studying the human aura is actually quite fascinating. It is very well investigated by science these days, and we will see how much they agree with what HPB has to say in her collected writings. Rabindranath Tagore, the famous Indian poet, once said, "I have listened and I have looked with open eyes. I have poured my soul into the world, seeking the unknown within the known, and I sing out loud in amazement." What he tapped into is most probably theosophy, or the divine wisdom, which is a formulation in human language of the nature, structure, origin, destiny, and operations of the cosmical universe and of the multitudes of beings which fill them. Or it is a substratum of all world religions and philosophies, taught and practiced by a few elect ever since man became a thinking being. Theosophy is in its practical bearing is purely divine ethics, says HPB in a glossary. These discoveries made by great mathematicians and Kabbalists prove beyond a shadow of doubt that every theology, from the earliest and oldest down to the latest, has sprung not only from a common source of abstract beliefs, but from one universal esoteric mystery language. The great archaic system, known from prehistoric ages as the sacred wisdom science, one that is contained and can be traced in every old as well as in every new religion, had and still has its universal language, the language of the Hierophants, which has 7 dialects, so to speak, each referring and being especially appropriated to one of the 7 mysteries of nature. Each had its own symbolism. Nature could thus be read in its fullness or viewed from one of its special aspects. The proof of this lies to this day in the extreme difficulty which the Orientalists experience in interpreting the allegorical writings of the Aryans and the hieratic records of old Egypt. This is because they will never remember that all the ancient records were written in a language which was universal and known to all nations alike in the days of old, but which is now intelligible only to a few. Like the Arabic figures or numbers which are plain to a man of whatever nation, or like the English word and, which becomes e for the Frenchman, and und for the German, and so on, yet which may be expressed for all civilized nations in the simple sign of and. So all the words of that mystery language signify the same thing to each man of whatever nationality. Theosophy is then,
can't get the sound on the TV.
The archaic Western religion, the esoteric doctrine once known in every ancient country having claims to civilization. To fully define theosophy, we must consider it under all its aspects. The interior world has not been hidden from all by impenetrable darkness, by that higher intuition acquired by theosophia or God knowledge, which carries the mind from the world of form into that of formless spirit. Man has been sometimes enabled in every age and every country to perceive things in the interior and invisible world. Plotinus, the pupil of the god Thor Ammonius Saccas, tells us that the secret gnosis, or the knowledge of theosophy, has 3 degrees: opinion, science, and illumination. The means or instrument of the first is sense or perception, of the second, dialectics, of the third, intuition. To the last, reason is subordinate, It is absolute knowledge founded on the identification of the mind with the object known. In the key to theosophy, Madame Blavatsky tells us that during the last quarter of every 100 years, an attempt is made by the masters of wisdom, of whom she has spoken, to help with the spiritual progress of humanity. That towards the close of each century, an outpouring of spirituality does take place. Someone or more persons have or will appear in the world as their agents, and that a greater or less amount of occult knowledge and teachings will be given out. And I'm quite positive that many of the modern scientists fit this bill. A short overview of the scientific development will help us a lot in our attempt to investigate the mystery of the human aura, what it is made of, really represents, and how significant its true nature is in our compound constitution. Madame Blavatsky made a very precise prediction in The Secret Doctrine, that we are at the close of the Aryan Kali Yuga, that a large rent will be made in the veil of nature, and that materialistic science would receive a death blow in 1897. Quite a statement, but was he right? There's every indication that he was. Exactly in that year, 1897, the English physicist Joseph J. Thomson discovered the first subatomic particle, the electron. And out went the theory of an atom as being an indivisible and solid building block of matter. For some time, it was thought that an atom was a bit like a plum pudding, in which electrons were loosely connected. But only a few years later, Ernest Rutherford discovered that it has a nucleus consisting of protons. The neutrons were discovered some years later by his student James Chadwick. It was this nucleus around which the electrons circled, and that most of the volume of an atom was empty space. But that was not the end of it either. In 1964, the physicist Barry Gell-Mann discovered that the particles of the nucleus consist of still smaller particles called quarks. And today it's believed that these particles only look like particles because they are so small, but that they might be tiny vibrating filaments of energy called strings. Brian Greene, professor of physics at Columbia University, New York, writes in his book, The Elegant Universe, that every particle is surrounded by an electric field, a so-called cloud of electric essence. And the force each particle feels arises through the interaction of their respective force fields by way of literally shooting quanta of light or photons at each other. And what is especially interesting for our purpose concerning the aura is that a quanta of light is not so much a transmitter of force per se, but rather a transmitter of a message of how the recipient must respond to the force in question. And for this reason, the photon is sometimes referred to as a messenger particle for the electromagnetic force, of which it is the smallest individualized packet. Albert Einstein said already at the beginning of the 20th century, when he formulated his general theory of relativity, that space and time are intertwined, that matter is inseparable from an ever-present quantum energy field, underlying all appearances, which he expressed with his famous words. We may therefore regard matter as being constituted by the regions of space in which the energy field is extremely extensive. There is no place in this new kind of physics for the field and matter, for the field is the only reality. Equipped with this information, it will become much more comprehensible what the aura is and represents. When we turn to the teachings of the perennial wisdom tradition now, and especially to the individualized human aura, What is this field of boundless energy, which Albert Einstein already called the only reality underlying and surrounding all physical phenomena? The esoteric doctrine teaches, like Buddhism, Brahmanism, and the Kabbalah, for example, that an infinite and unknown essence exists from all eternity, which is in regular and harmonious succession, is either passive or active. This periodicity is called in Hindu philosophy the days and nights of Brahma, or in Sanskrit terms, Manvantara, the active period, followed by a pralaya, a period of rest. The secret doctrine carries this idea into the region of metaphysics and postulates a one form of existence as the basis and source of all things. Sanskrit word is prabhavapayaya, the place or other plane whence emerges the origination and into which is the resolution of all things. That is the reason why occult metaphysics speaks of two ones, the one on the unreachable plane of absoluteness and infinity or parabrahm, on which no speculation is possible, and the second one on the plane of emanation, the second being, so to speak, the reflection of the first one, for it is the logos or Ishvara in the universe of illusion. And that it is motion which begets the logos, the word in occultism. Mahatma Letter 90 confirms that the universal perpetual motion, which never ceases, never slackens, nor increases its speed, not even during the interludes between the pralayas or nights of Brahma, is the only eternal and uncreated deity we are able to recognize. From darkness or the incomprehensible to finite minds radiates light, and one solitary or single ray drops into the mother aspect or nature, which occurs on the plane of metaphysical abstraction, divine thought or intelligence impregnating chaos. The first great cause is this first unconscious radiation, a center of spiritual energy, unborn and eternal, acting through the logos. At the commencement of a great Manvantara, Parabrahm manifests as Mula Prakriti and then as a logos, as the secret doctrine. This as yet unmanifested first logos is equivalent to the unconscious universal mind. It constitutes the basis of the subject side of manifested being, and is the source of all manifestations of individual consciousness. Cosmic minds appears only at the third of the 7 stages of evolution, and is confined or limited to the manifested universe as HPB. Cosmic mind is Mahat or divine ideation in active or creative operation, and thus only the periodical manifestation in time and in practice of the eternal universal mind, which is there only potentially. Mula Prakriti, or primordial cosmic substance, is the foundation of the object side of things, the basis of all objective evolution and cosmogenesis. Force does not emerge with primordial substance, but from Parabrahm. It is a transformation into energy extracted from the latency of the one reality or Parabrahm into objectivity. Force succeeds Mula Prakriti. Minus force, Mula Prakriti is for all practical intents and purposes non-existent, a mere abstraction. In Hindu cosmogony, Parabrahm, the rootless root of all, is not even mentioned, says HBB in her commentaries. Only Mula Prakriti or its lining. Mula Prakriti is the root nature or soul of the one spirit from which Akasha radiates. Akasha is the phenomenal matrix of the universe, The mysterium magnum from all that exists is born by separation or differentiation. It is the cause of existence. It fills all the infinite space, is space itself in one sense, of both its sixth and seventh principle. In it lies inherent the eternal ideation of the universe in its ever-changing aspects on the plane of matter and objectivity. It is called Svabhavat in Buddhist philosophy, the source of all life, visible and invisible, an essence inexhaustible and ever-present, a numinal and abstract aspect of matter, says Mahatma Kutumi. Svabhavat is the plastic essence that fills the universe, the concrete aspect of the abstraction called Mula Prakriti, says a secret doctrine. Mula Prakriti does not refer to an expansion from a false center. It is the periodical shadow of the immaterial substance present in eternity, thrown into the lap of Maya or illusion. It is not an increase in size, but a change of condition. This was symbolized by an egg or a sphere. And since fecundation of an egg takes place before it is being dropped, so it happens with the non-eternal periodical germ, which later becomes a mundane egg, containing in itself the potency of the universe. It is what Hindu philosophy calls Hiranyagarbha or Brahma, formed by the causeless cause as a golden egg resplendent as a sun, which is a subjective underlying force field with two poles. The positive one acts in the manifested world of matter. The negative one is lost in unknowable absoluteness. Stanza 3 of the secret doctrine describes this process as father-mother spinnerweb, the essence of an electromagnetic energy field. The two made in one, a universe woven out of its own substance. And the Mahatma let us say it is spirit and life, without quality or quantity or form yet, but rather the space occupied in that ocean of spirit by the result of effects impressed thereon. This radiant force field is the underlying essence, which contains everything in its potentiality. Every physical phenomena, from subatomic particles to complete and complicated systems, like planets or a human being, is an emanation of this underlying electromagnetic energy field. Its radiation around animate and inanimate objects was called throughout recorded history aura. This auric envelope has 7 layers, says HBB, just as cosmic space and our physical epidermis. It is within on different planes of subjectivity, merging gradually into objectivity. When the season of reproduction arrives, the sub-astral extrudes a miniature of itself from the egg of the surrounding aura. This germ grows and feeds on the aura until it becomes fully developed, when it gradually separates from its parent, carrying with it its own sphere of aura. This auric egg, or the underlying energy field, is really the true manifested man, says HBB, because it is a manifestation of the vital life forces, which are flowing forth from the various foci of the reincarnating monad. So how does it relate to the monad, the immortal part of man, which reincarnates in the lowest kingdoms of nature, where it gradually progresses through them to become man, and then the final goal, nirvana? The monad cannot be called a spirit per se. It is a ray, a breath or spark of the absolute, having no relation with the conditioned and relative finiteness, and is unconscious on our plane. Besides the material which will be needed for its future human form, the monad requires first a spiritual model or prototype or astral form to shape itself into, and secondly, an intelligent consciousness to guide its evolution and progress, neither of which is possessed by the homogeneous monad or spark of the absolute, or by senseless though living matter. The astral form or manifested ideation of a human being is this spiritual prototype clothing the monad. It happens in and is surrounded by its egg-shaped sphere of aura. The astral form itself is the nucleus of this sphere, an ethereal agglomerate of life atoms in the auric egg, a combination with manas or mind and buddhi, its vehicle or soul, which gradually assumes more or less a definite human outline. The aura is the origin of the feeling of sympathy and antipathy. Every human being is surrounded by its own emotional and passional as well as psychovital atmosphere, a portion of the lower layers of the auric egg. Every human passion, every thought and quality is indicated in the aura by corresponding colors and shades of colors. If these nerve vibrations are made intense enough and brought into vibratory relation with the astral element, the result is sound. This is important to remember because it will be all confirmed by science later on. When the ray point of the spiritual monad reaches its own intermediate sphere, it descends no further into matter. Only its psychomagnetic ray, having stronger affinities for the material world, descends still further, awakening into activity the life atoms on each one of the planes between that of the re-embodied ego and the astral physical matter of our earth. Each part of the composite human constitution remains on its own plane, but extrudes its excess of life from itself into the next lower one, until finally the physical plane is reached, wherein only the tip of the ray, collecting unto itself life atoms of this plane, builds or forms the physical germinal cell. It would be quite wrong to suppose that the re-embodying ego itself is in the germinal cell, or on a plane slightly less physical than ours. The process is an exact analogy of what occurs in the building of the globes of a planetary chain, where the passage of excess of life takes place along and around the range of substances from cosmic plane to cosmic plane. The vital force is not enclosed in man, but it radiates within and around him like a luminous sphere or aura, and it may be made to act at a distance. It is the aura which, according to our mental and physical state of purity or impurity, either opens for us vistas into other worlds, or shuts us out altogether from anything but the three-dimensional world of matter. This is how important the role of the auric egg is in the human constitution. It is the field of all the different ranges of consciousness of the embodied man, and it is likewise the ethereal and astral, and even spiritual substance or auric envelope, out of which every one of the vehicles of the human entity is formed. So what has science found out about all of this by now? The first insight into the subatomic world at the beginning of the 20th century shook the foundations of physical science, which made the pioneers of quantum physics like the Nobel Prize laureate Werner Heisenberg exclaim, "The reality we can put into words is never reality itself." The first gulp from the glass of natural science might turn you into an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. And his superior Niels Bohr, another Nobel Prize winner, said, "Everything we call real is made of things that cannot be regarded as real. If quantum mechanics has not profoundly shocked you, you have not understood it yet. In 2009, a book with the title Consciousness and the Universe, Quantum Physics, Evolution, Brain and Mind, a compilation of papers written by many scientists worldwide, was published by Sir Roger Penrose, Emeritus Professor of Mathematics from Oxford University, Stuart Hameroff, Professor of Anesthesiology and Psychology, University of Arizona, Subhash Kak, Professor of Computer Sciences, Oklahoma State University. The summary of one paper sounds very theosophical, where it is said, whatever the fundamental source of creation, it itself must be uncreated. Otherwise, there is a hidden creator lying in the background, and then we must ask who or what created that. The source of reality must be self-sufficient, capable of engendering complex systems on the micro and macro scale, self-regulating and holistic. Nothing can be outside its influence. Ultimately, the uncreated source must also turn into the physical universe, not simply oversee it as a god of conventional religions. Only consciousness fits the bill, because no experience takes place outside of consciousness, which means that there is a reality beyond our awareness. We take the nature of consciousness as an energy field phenomenon, analogous to but preceding the physical quantum field. In essence, space and time are conceptual artifacts that spring from primordial consciousness. The reason why the human mind meshes with nature, mathematics, and the fundamental forces described by physics is no accident, because we are a product of the same conceptual expansion by which primordial consciousness turned into the physical world. Ideas are not substances, but if elementary particles and all matter made of them are not substances either, the playing field has been leveled. We cannot extract consciousness from the physical universe despite the fervent hope of materialists and reductionists. They are forced into a logical paradox, for either the molecules that make up our brain are inherently conscious, or a process must be located and described by which those molecules invent consciousness. Such a process has not and never will be specified. It would amount to saying that the table salt, once it enters the body, finds a way to dissolve in the blood, enters the brain, and in doing so learns how to think, feel, and reason. A successful theory of everything will only emerge by taking wholeness as the starting point and fitting the parts into it rather than vice versa. But what about the insight into the spiritual realm of our human constitution as outlined before, concerning the aura and the compound constitution of us human beings? I came already across another remarkable scientist in the mid-1990s whose name is Dr. Valerie Hunt. She was professor of physiological sciences at the University of Los Angeles, who died in 2040 at the age of 97. In the early 1970s, she was teaching a graduate seminar on the neuromuscular aspect of behavior. And she just casually mentioned that some common human experience seemed to defy rational understanding, lying beyond the scope of scientific inquiry. These comments had a very unexpected effect, like lighting the fuses of stored fireworks. The whole class enlivened and students began sharing some of their own strange experiences. At the next class meeting, she acknowledged students' interest in strange happenings, made a few comments, and then she wanted to continue with the scheduled course. But the entire class insisted that this was the class where they should study consciousness, even ancient literature, that the true function of a university was to expand the frontiers of knowledge, Better than to critique existing research would be to design a new direction. Valerie Hunt could, of course, not change the curriculum, but she agreed to stay an extra half hour for those who wanted to talk about psychic phenomena and esoteric experiences. Confronted with lots of challenges, this became the starting point of a serious investigation into the mind, consciousness, and the human aura, or what is called today the bioelectric magnetic energy field that surrounds every human being as well as every object in nature. In one of the following semesters, she took a sabbatical leave to explore these energy fields concepts in Southeast Asia, observing acupuncture clinics in Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore, as well as watching native ritual healing sessions in Bali, Indonesia, and Thailand. Equipped with her own insights into the extended reality of the cultures she had witnessed, she returned to her university, motivated to critically explore and find out for herself if these claims of subtle energy were really valid. The first equipment they used in a laboratory to measure these energies was a telemetry instrument especially built for them by a NASA engineer, who had already developed a telemetry system for astronauts, used to send their vital physiological recordings of muscle and heart activities during the first manned space trip from the moon to Earth. It is a kind of radio broadcasting system, capable of intercepting and projecting the body's electrical activities, picked up from the body's surface by sensors, leading to a miniature battery-operated radio transmitter and amplifier attached to the person's belt. The signals are broadcasted by FM radio frequencies, and these airborne signals are being picked up in the laboratory on Earth by a radio receiver and recorded on tape or disc for future analysis. It was already well known that stimulated brain cells create electrical energy, which can be recorded with an electroencephalogram or EEG, signals from the muscles with an electromyogram or EMG, for the heart with an electrocardiogram or EKG. But using the telemetry instrument for recordings from the body's surface with electrodes, not only all activities of the body were contained in their readings, but also the auric field of a person. It is smaller in amplitude, but higher in frequency. These extremely high biological frequencies of electrical currents, which could later also be associated with mind phenomena and human consciousness, were first researched in Valerie Hunt's laboratory at the University College in Los Angeles. And these are the findings. When the brain, heart, and muscle frequencies were filtered out, the frequency information of 500 up to 20,000 cycles per second were continuous, the highest the telemetry instrument was able to measure. With the discovery of fractal mathematics, or the geometry of nature, computer scientists very soon developed new graphic programs. The latest Aura monitor is able to record cycles up to 200,000 per second. The closest description of a bioenergy field or aura is a spatial structure in the fabric of space itself. This reminds us of what the Mahatma Kutumi said in the Mahatma letters in this connection. Spirit and life are indivisible, and are the space occupied in that ocean of spirit by the result of effects impressed there. So how does this electromagnetic energy field around us come about? And this is how Valerie Hunt describes it. We know that all objects, animate and inanimate, occupying space are composed of atoms, inside of which the electrons spin around the nucleus, releasing the raw energy of positive and negative ions. Energy is an important factor in the function of our bodies. It is the fundamental entity of nature, consisting of negative and positive particles exhibiting attraction and repulsion, which manifests as movement called currents. The key players creating this electrical energy are ions. They are atoms which have either lost or gained an electron, making them either positive or negatively charged. The positively charged ions stay in the vicinity of other atoms, searching for another negative ion to become a new atom. The negatively charged ions, on the other hand, migrate to the surface of the physical body, where they hang around the positively charged surface. This is an energy surrounding all physical bodies. It is broader, faster, and more dynamic from living structures. And this field around a person has been called throughout history the human aura. It radiates light frequency, which can sometimes be seen by others in higher states of consciousness. The biofield monitor showed that this energy field is unique to each individual, changing with emotions and consciousness. Its electric field transacts with other outside fields of information, altering raw outside stimuli to meet its own needs. It is a primary information selecting and processing system, because all outside stimuli and information must selectively pass through this field before reaching the nervous system. It is a primary marker of living behaviors and feeling states. Since it is the first action of the mind, Valerie Hunt named this mind field, because information through the biofield vibrations is an organism's primary source of nourishment. This energy field is a quantum concept of vibrations, and their frequency can be visualized by different colors. It has its own integrity. It reacts, interacts, and transmits with other quantum fields of information, and it is selective. From her intensive studies with the electronic equipment, Hunt came to the conclusion that also the mind is an energy field phenomenon, having its seat in the aura. It acts both inside and outside of us as well in bodily tissues. Before brain waves were activated, the field already responded, although the person experienced no conscious sensation, and even before increased activity in the brain. The auric field was also studied by Hunt and her team in a near sound sterile room at her university, where sound is absorbed by baffles projected from the walls and ceiling. The room had no light or outside sound to provide electromagnetic energy. Immediately they felt strange sensory aberrations and lost all sense of time. They could not make any recordings. Their consciousnesses altered so rapidly that they were not able to operate instruments. Other experiments took place in a shielded room where the natural electromagnetic field of the air could be altered without changing the level of gravitational force or oxygen content. When the electrical aspect of the room was withdrawn, the auric fields became randomly disorganized, scattered, and incoherent. Sensory perception was so impaired that subjects lost all awareness of their bodily location. Energy was no longer flowing, but rather jumping between people and their chakras or energy centers. They drew upon each other's energy fields, which weakened all fields. The body responds as though they were threatened. And the electrical field was increased again, the auric fields were restored to normalcy. On the other hand, magnetism was decreased. Gross incoordination occurred. Subjects could not balance their bodies anymore or touch their nose with a finger. By increasing the magnetic field beyond the normal state, they could easily stand on one foot or even balance at impossible angles. From over 600 hours of recordings under many circumstances, it was discovered that every person's individual energy field or aura was characterized by such measures as color, quantity of energy, areas where energy flowed freely, while others were blocked Every change occurred in the aura first, before any of the other systems changed. Energy field extended everywhere as an open system, free to evolve and grow. And they are sometimes in disequilibrium. This was once demonstrated when a television crew from a national broadcasting station visited Valerie Hahn's laboratory for shooting a documentary. 9 technicians appeared with an array of equipment, and of course with their own individual energy fields or aura. An odor of alcohol was noticeable in their breath. They had apparently been entertained at a party the night before. The scientists were prepared to instrument the test person's energy field for direct online filming of the oscilloscope and computer displays. But to their amazement, a glitch occurred in their equipment. No signal could be obtained. It was at first thought that the technical equipment of the television crew had overloaded their own instruments. But strangely enough, the television equipment was not the problem. Because when the TV crew was asked to leave the room, although leaving their equipment behind, normal energy field recordings were possible again within a few minutes. The problem were not incompatible instruments, but rather incompatible human energy fields, a sensitive subject and a contaminated crew, or even a field reaction from sensitive staff, which made direct recordings impossible. The problem could only be circumvented by using already recorded data during the documentation. As already mentioned, electronic data confirmed that the human energy field is unique. It not only transacts, but also makes choices. The conclusion of the scientists was that matter and energy, mind and spirit are not really different things, but only aspects of an expanded reality. They are major attractors carrying strong personal and emotional valences, resulting from childhood trauma and other livelihoods. Experience of reflexes from material reality, like body or personality states, for example, are recorded in and recovered from the brain. Other impressions, such as experienced knowing, higher information, transcendental ideas, insight about ultimate sources of reality and creativity in its purest form, are properties of the higher mind, which seems to be outside the domain of material reality, as Hunt and the team were able to measure it. It is beyond material substance, yet interacts with them in an open system. The mind, with its vast complexity, can explore far beyond the closed circuit of the brain. By moving into an altered state of consciousness, the brain may not even be aware of it. This led to the hypothesis that the human energy field contains the highest level of the mind, which interrelates with the cosmosphere. Electrical stimulation did not activate what was considered the higher mind. There is no evidence that the higher levels of the mind are located in the brain. Grounded in a state of material reality, our energy field ranges from about 350 to 600 cycles per second. An altered state of consciousness exhibits a range of up to 200,000 cycles per second. These upper ranges of vibrations also contain information of previous livelihoods, which can be experienced. The human energy field is organized by emotions, which first cause an agitation in the field and then in the body and awareness. If focused in the space-time domain, the concern is with body and self. If out of time in a mystical state, the concern is with the soul. And Valerie Hahn quotes from Hindu philosophy where it is stated that the inner search culminates in self-realization. No charismatic leader is needed anymore. The higher self contacts the perennial wisdom directly. to develop this higher plane of knowledge and the techniques to access it is our evolutionary work. In a laboratory, Valerian discovered that the auric vibrations in microvolt had the same frequency as the human ear. When amplified, these vibrations become sounds, which can be heard. They coalesce with outside sounds, changing also in color depending on the frequency, and become our personal symphony. Just what HPV predicted decades ago. Any vibrations that are seen or felt arrive at our nervous system via the human energy field. It constitutes the transaction between the world and a person. State of health and illness are reflected in the field. A healthy field shows all colors of the rainbow. During illness, a viral infection, for example, certain colors dominate. The discoveries of Valerie Hunt are now able to physically confirm with sophisticated computer technology what could only be found in metaphysical teachings of the perennial wisdom tradition, handed down from time immemorial by their adepts. But also Kirlian photography had a revival on a more sophisticated level, making the aura and its activities visible. In the 1990s, a Russian physicist called Dr. Konstantin Korokov and his colleagues at the St. Petersburg State University of Informational Technologies invented a digital form of Kirlian photography called GDV, which stands for Gas Discharge Visualization Technique, incorporating the knowledge of the German Peter Mandl Institute for Exoteric Medicine in software programs to analyze the human aura. Esoteric is a compound word of esoteric and energetic, incorporating ancient wisdom and understanding of cosmic laws. The findings and interpretations are identical with Valerian's research. Disturbances and blockages in the energy flow of the human aura, which cause illness, can now be treated with a method called color puncture, where the acupuncture points concerned are not treated with needles anymore, but stimulated with a different spectrum of light frequencies, colors, producing astonishing results. I think the best conclusion from all this information is Madame Blavatsky's advice in her collected writings, where she says, the student must purify his soul nature, moral, mental, and physical. If the upadhi or vehicle is not perfectly pure, it cannot preserve recollections coming from a higher state of consciousness. Therefore, it is above all things of importance that the thoughts should be kept pure. We must purify the lower quaternary of our physical constitution, which is the physical body, the astral body or prototype, prana or the vital life principle, and kamarupa, the desire body and seed of the lower mind and emotions, that it shall vibrate in unison with the upper triad, which is Atma or the spiritual monad, a radiation from the absolute, Buddhi, which is its container or spiritual soul, and higher manas or mind, which links the monad to mortal man. As we have started with a quotation by Rabindranath Tagore, we will close this talk now with another one by him, which will make us aware that every new day of our life is another opportunity to contribute as best as we can towards the high ideal of universal brotherhood, when he said, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy. And this is the end. Thank you very much.